Well, what's up, everyone? Thank you for joining me again here at Free Mic Live. Today is our first episode of the Free Mic Cast. So now I'll be bringing in some guests from all over the place, and today my special guest is a friend of mine, Derrick Wilson. I made a video last night, and I was analyzing, making my own commentary of his commentary, and the Texas scorecard. But first, while we were talking or we were just having a conversation, which kind of got off a little bit off the subject, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, News came out, breaking news: President Trump acquitted, second time. That's right, second time. Two scoops, two genders, two acquittals. Let's deal with it. And in any case, well, hope you enjoy the show. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us. And with us here today is Derrick Wilson. He's the president of the Tarrant County Young Republicans. And full disclosure, I am the communication director for the Tarrant County Young Republicans. So we're buddies. We know each other. We work with each other for about a year and a half now. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, just about.
I think we've known each other longer than that, but you're the best
Yeah,
communications director we've ever had.
really?
That includes
Oh.
that includes out of me too, because I did it and you do a much better job.
Oh no.
So,
All I do is just post some dank memes sometimes.
oh yeah, well the one you posted last night about Gina Carano got almost I think 200 likes now. I don't know
I
if
think
you've looked
so.
at it.
I think
Yeah,
so. It was a pretty big hit in Instagram. That's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Considering the amount of followers, plus you've really built up our following over there,
yeah.
so you've done a great job. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Uh,
Well, speaking of that whole thing with debacle with Disney, uh,
mm-hmm.
I think that's probably one of the things that has kind of woken up a lot of people, with especially a lot of normies, and also conservatives of how much power, cultural power, a lot of these institutions have, and how much we've lost. And
Mm-hmm.
you recently wrote an opinion editorial in
Mm-hmm.
Texas Scorecard, and you could discuss about it in a little bit. But yeah, as I was reading it, and I was like thinking, man, I totally agree with that, and that's exactly what I've been thinking. We've lost all this cultural power, all this institutional power, and ceded it to basically the corporate left. Not necessarily progressives or anything like that, but these people are, they're in the left wing of the political spectrum, in my opinion, but
Mm-hmm.
they are definitely corporatists. They're definitely
Yeah.
people who are in it for the money.
Mm-hmm.
They'll pander to whoever they can to get that, and because we, as you and I, are probably, we consider ourselves as conservatives. We A lot of us, we've our parents and our previous generation have opted to go for, for actually real work, what's considered real work, like
Mm-hmm.
in politics talk, and kind of left the arts and entertainment and tech industry kind of like at the wayside. And
Mm-hmm.
many of us, and it's understandable. We're built to grow our families, to have families, and have secure jobs. But aside from that, because we've lost all this cultural power, they could just run roughshod on us, and a lot of people just hate us in many ways because they're just trained, they're so ingrained and trained to hate Republicans and conservatives.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things going there. I think part of the reason the Gina Carano thing was so big of a deal to a lot of us, and some of us had a hard time putting our thumb on exactly why this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it's that
Hmm.
Gina Carano, like when they first started silencing people on the right, like the Alex Joneses and stuff,
Hmm.
and we're like, okay, yeah, I kind of get it. But Gina Carano wasn't like some sort of conservative firebrand. She was
Yep.
like moderate.
Yep.
Like we're looking at him going, wow, if they silence her and she's milder than I am, and I consider myself to be reasonable, then what's to keep my head from being on the chopping block next? That's where they want to go.
Hmm.
Um, but you're right. We pulled out of the culture, and what I didn't mention in the article, a place that gets a lot of the blame is, particularly for those who grew up in conservative um, Christian or evangelical circles. We looked at a lot of those places like the arts and media,
Mm-hmm.
and they had already started to sour at that point. And our culture, our subculture, kind of went, well, those places belong to the devil. Stay out of them. And then we just gave it to them all together, and they were like, "Thank you," and they ran with it.
Yeah,
So
I
we're
I
over here,
understand.
yeah, we're over here building our empire or whatever we're doing. We're building our businesses and everything else. Um, you know, whether you're a carpenter or a plumber
Mm-hmm.
or a CEO or whatever. I mean, I know a lot of conservatives that are working in the business world as well,
Mm-hmm.
but we left media and everything else out to dry. Like, just totally left it out. We don't send a lot of people into education. Texas,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed, isn't as bad as other places. I do meet conservative teachers here,
Yep,
but I can tell you on
that's a
the
lot of
East
them.
Coast, they're kind of rare on the East Coast,
Really.
and there's a lot of people that started putting their kids into homeschooling because
Mm-hmm.
of it. Um, and you'll notice there's a big cultural difference in the way that those homeschool kids grew up versus those who went to public school, and it's because of what they were taught. So
Mm-hmm.
what in my opinion we need to be doing is we need to take those tactics that we use for homeschooling, and we need to be putting our money into creating private schools that are affordable and better than the public schools, so that people go, you know what, I want to send my kid over there because, if my kid wants to, I don't know, be a plumber or a welder or whatever, they've got shop classes so they don't have to go to college. Or if they want to go in academia, they're going to be respected because all the kids that come out of the school are very smart and well educated. And, we need to create an alternative, but it has to be a better alternative. And I think if we do that, we actually have a shot at molding kids who understand and love liberty.
You know,
And those kids are going to grow up and make a change in the world.
yeah, you mentioned academia, and it's funny because all this cancel culture actually started in academia. If you remember, I think it was about 2015, 2016, there was this huge
Mm-hmm.
uproar in Evergreen College with, I believe it was Brett Weinstein or Eric Weinstein. It was one of the Weinstein brothers. And
Mm-hmm.
they were warning at that time because at the time, the students were wanted to have like some sort of segregated safety day or something where they wanted to have all
Right.
the white people stay home and all the
Right.
everybody
Right.
else. And
Yep.
the Professor Weinstein comes in there and says, "You know what? I'm here to teach. If you guys, I need to get in my class, and I'm not going to go home just because you tell me to go home." And so they shouted him down. They smeared him, and they actually forced him. I think him and his wife out of the Evergreen College. And they're liberals. They're
Yeah.
they're they're old school liberals.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats, And
Well,
ever
they're
since
kind of
then,
rare these days.
they I don't know if they're
Old
rare,
school
but
liberals.
I think in many ways they are scared. One,
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like they don't have the power anymore, and two, a lot of them are really blind to this whole thing. Because I mean, I've spoken to some regular liberals, and they're so surprised at how much cultural shift there has been. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
them even tell me like they don't even recognize their own, like like the Democratic Party anymore, and they really identified with it a long time ago.
Right.
And I think that's just within the last 10 years actually.
Yeah.
And
Well, you're right about the schools for sure.
yeah,
But what he had to have not noticed was that in order for that to happen, those kids didn't learn that at home.
oh
It
no
didn't
no
come out of nowhere.
no,
That
it's
was
been
his
building.
his fellow professors
Mm-hmm.
that were teaching these kids like this, and somehow he either remained ignorant to it, or he didn't want to see it,
Oh
or maybe he didn't take it seriously.
well, he's not
Um,
ignorant of it now.
no, but he ended up being the moderate, and moderates are out. You know,
Oh yeah, if you're
so.
moderate, you're right wing. I think there
Hmm.
was an AOC supporter I was posting in Twitter. He is a pretty popular guy. He's got his own podcast, And what he posted this meme that says, "We have no left wing party here. We have no left wing group or left wing leader representing us." And AOC to him was the moderate. Nancy Pelosi was the center right.
Right.
Anything else is far
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, they reframed the center for sure. I
And
remember at the end of the Obama presidency, they were talking about how he was essentially a conservative, a right wing
yes,
president.
oh
And
yeah,
we're like, whoa, did we just watch the Overton window jump like
mm-hmm.
right over to the left?
Yeah.
And they
And
do that
you
on
and you wrote
purpose. They
about
know
that
what
in
they're
in
doing.
your
Yeah.
op-ed. You wrote about
Mm-hmm.
that. The Overton window just shifted massively, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
people at the end were just flabbergasted, like, "What the heck is going on?" Even in New York, I was actually living in New York at that time. Let's see, 2014, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first time I heard that somebody actually mentioned Obama as kind of like a pseudo conservative or the Republicans Democrat, as they were called. And somebody I knew up there just couldn't believe what he was hearing. I said, he's a flaming liberal. How could they say that? Yeah, at that time, it just kind of like, yeah, they were just talking, whatever. But
Yeah.
where are we now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's because the party shifted to the left during his presidency so quickly that he actually got left behind on what they consider their right. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you always hear two conflicting stories from leftists all the time. They either tell you that the Republican Party has swung to the right, or they say the Republican Party hasn't changed with the times. Now, these are two incompatible ideas. Like, either we've swung or we haven't changed. And the reason for that, I believe, is because they're swinging so far to the left. It's kind of like a bunch of people on a boat looking at an island and swearing the island is floating away. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the island that's moving, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
And to be truthful, like, the Republican Party's even swung to the left. Like, I
Yes.
remember, like, we look at a lot of us look now at Trump as like this epitome of like conservatism. I think he's more of a populist, but even like the most hardcore of conservatives are like
Everybody
Trump,
knew he was a
Trump, Trump.
liberal back in New York. Everybody knew he was a
Right,
liberal.
right. And so, we're all about these conservative values and such, but Trump spent a ton of money. Fiscally, he wasn't super conservative.
Yeah.
And he entered office as the most pro LGBT president in history entering
I still
office.
remember that.
Yeah.
And the
And you have
Republicans
people,
clapped for it.
right. And it's like 2 years ago, if this guy was on the other side, this would be a problem. But now it's we've shifted with it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. I'm just saying we have moved to the left in a lot of regards, and we're still considered
Mm-hmm.
to be moving to the right somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, one of the important arguments back in the day, and it's like, but before Trump was, there was a lot of staunch free marketers, and there has to be no government intervention in some ways, and minimal regulation. But now you're starting to hear a lot of conservatives talk about actually regulating tech companies, regulating a lot of our trade, and a lot of some of that was a Democrat talking point uh, about a decade
Mm-hmm.
ago, and we have moved into that territory where we
Right.
realized that there's so much power on the other side that I don't that in some ways some people, even including me, I've I'm not as
Mm-hmm.
staunch as a free marketer as I was. I mean, I'm still for free market, but I do believe that
Right.
we do need some sort of balance, especially in the tech area.
Yeah. I have thought about that myself because I was usually I used to be very strictly libertarian on the issue,
Hmm.
but we're beginning to see the repercussions of that. And it's not entirely the free market per se that's at fault here. We also allow, how do I put this? We also let all of these large companies lobby for laws that benefit themselves to the detriment of smaller companies. I
Yeah,
don't
I agree.
necessarily think that that's a free market,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you read Teddy Roosevelt's autobiography, he talks about something. I think he called it the Black Horse Brigade or Black Horse Cavalry or whatever. But basically, it was lobbyists that would come in and they buy politicians or convince politicians, however you want to put it. But they were large companies that would pass laws against themselves, knowing they could afford to comply with them,
Mm-hmm.
but their smaller competitors could not. And so it allowed these large companies get bigger and bigger as all of their smaller competitors fall off to the wayside. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we've let that go on for so long that we've created these behemoths that make it smaller for small or harder for smaller competitors to enter the industry. Otherwise, you know, places like Parlor could have made it,
Mm-hmm.
but they're so limited in options now that last I heard they were in some foreign country trying to find hosting service.
I believe it was Russia. Actually, they were trying
Yeah,
to
that
get
looks
a
good.
hosting service from a Russian server, but then I think
Mm-hmm.
somebody they found a problem because when John Matsey was trying to negotiate a deal, I think somebody found that whatever that server was, they could not secure him because there was just such a hold on the internet by the U.S. companies that they could not
Mm-hmm.
guarantee it. So they had to eventually back out of that deal, and John Massey
Yeah.
got fired.
So so do we go the Teddy Roosevelt route and start trust busting the heck out of things?
It's funny
Like
you said that. Teddy Roosevelt was considered a populist back then.
it's true. He was. He was a progressive Republican.
Yeah.
Progressives always try and remind me of that fact, like he was one of them. But I'm like, have you actually ever read Teddy Roosevelt? He's like talking about the family unit. Like he's
Oh
got
yeah.
part. He's got a section where he chews out abortion more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love to bring this up to him because they're like, he was a progressive. He was all about women's rights. It's like, well, women's right to vote, yeah, but not to murder.
Oh yeah.
There was one book or one, I think it was chapter 8 in his autobiography. He talked about he was when he was governor of New York, he would get pardon letters from people's mothers. My
Mm-hmm.
son wasn't that bad. Please, commute a sentence or whatever. Well, there was this guy who had a mistress and he got her pregnant and he got her to have an abortion. And this guy's mother wrote in and asked for a pardon for him because he was charged for it. And Teddy Roosevelt said that he wrote her back and said not only would not give him a pardon, he wished it was within his power to increase the sentence.
Wow.
And he put that in his autobiography. He was staunch about it.
Dang.
But yeah, he was a progressive, but he wasn't a leftist in any regard whatsoever.
Labels change over time. It's like how
Mm-hmm.
liberals used to mean classical liberals,
Right.
and now then social liberals, but now liberal in the general sense is basically leftist.
Basically leftism. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these
And,
liberals are the social liberals are trying to fight that. I mean, you have that you
mm,
see that with Tim Pool, see that with
mm,
some progressives are fighting back with the woke leftism that even
right.
they are getting hammered now.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of this whole cultural power, about leftists taking over our institutions, and one of the things that struck me, and as I was reading your op-ed, is that you did say that we need to develop our own infrastructure, basically, to be able to
Mm,
cultivate all these things in the arts and technology. And
mm,
one of the criticisms that somebody brought up to me, and I was listening about, is that eventually what is going to happen is that you're going to have two different structures, and we're not going to be able to communicate with each other. And the fear of that is decoupling. And now, with that, and this was brought up by they're not conservatives. I think it was Luke Ruandowski or somebody from one of those podcasts was saying, if the logical conclusion is that we are going to have parallel structures, and eventually, then we're going to have to talk about possible a possible peaceful divorce in our own country. I, for one, don't want that.
mm.
Nobody wants. Everybody we want to have. Yeah, that we want to have a strong country, and now we're hearing all this talk about, well, why don't we bring it up? And as you know, there's a bill right now in the Texas Congress, Texas Capitol, that they're trying to bring up a
Texas
referendum.
legislature. Yep.
Yeah, trying to bring a referendum to see if we could vote
Yeah.
on it. I think eventually it's going to come to that.
Yeah. Um, well, if it had to happen, of course you'd want it to be peaceful, especially
Hmm.
since we're now in our 30s, and you always hope that if there's some sort of conflict, it would happen to your generation and not to your children's generation.
That's true. Hmm.
Um, which is all the more reason now to try and make sure it's a peaceful one, if anything. But honestly, I don't think that separation could work for this country. I think we are too dependent on each other. We have pushed into bubbles, and we more or less do grow up in different Americas, even when we live in the same country a lot of
Hmm.
times because of our subculture, our surroundings. And one of the things that makes America great is that we have all of these states that have a certain amount of autonomy, so that these cultures can grow and we can still work together. We have or had some common values that we all shared. Problem is that those values are breaking down. I mean, when you're looking at
Hmm.
places where they're tearing down statues of George Washington or
Hmm.
removing Abraham Lincoln's name from a
Hmm.
school because he was a racist,
Or decapitating
I can see.
Grant and all that.
Right. When that stuff starts happening, you do have to wonder if there's a breakdown coming, but we can't really survive without each other at this point. This whole country, the way the infrastructure is built, the way that our commerce is built. I mean, just look at the if all of the red places left. First off, we'd have to leave all the major cities behind.
Hmm.
Really, um, where's all the food going to go? Are we going to have like giant? Just look at a map of the United States split into red and blue counties, and you'll see how it wouldn't
Oh yeah,
work.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. You have
so
spots of blue, and everything else is red.
right, this isn't like the Civil War when there was a strong delineation between North and South, and all the newspapers in the South supported the South, and
Hmm.
all of the media down there, and all the churches were on the same side, and in the North, the same sort of thing. It's not like that anymore. We are very separated, even though we all live together, and we are all feet apart more or less. Um, yeah, in a lot of ways, I think that one of the things that makes this country of such great value commercially, um, and to the whole world, is this country's stability. We have the longest lasting constitution. We had a civil war, you know, back in the 1860s, but compared to the world stage, we have been extremely stable. And another reason that it would not work is if we started to bust up, that stability is going to be gone. This country is not going to be as great a place for other countries to put their investments. They're not going to depend on it for infrastructure industry like it has. Um, there are other countries that, in a lot of ways, are doing better than us in intellectual fields like tech and such. I think we would have a hard time with South Korea, for instance. I believe has some very good tech industry.
Well, South Korea and Japan have always had a very high tech industry, and a lot of them were able to go
They have
forward
very good
because of
education
the
systems.
defense that we've actually provided them. They don't have to worry so much. Well, South Korea is a little different,
Yeah.
but in Japan, definitely they don't have to put so much money into their defense.
Hmm.
Did I just lose you there? Oh, there.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing to consider as well. That's another thing to consider as well. In a lot of ways, um, the United States is the pin in the grenade
Mm-hmm.
for the world. You know what I mean? Like I think we keep the world a little bit more peaceful. I know that we could take a lot of flack for being the world police. In a lot of ways, I do think we overdo it. But if we were not on the world stage as a unified country that would step in certain scenarios, I think there are other world powers that would look to take advantage of our absence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
China.
that would be bad for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, China, Russia, any of them really. I mean, I'm sure we'd see a lot of small conflicts. I mean, a world without conquest is historically really odd, and we don't have a lot of conquest going on right now.
Yep. This is
So
probably one of the few times in the world where uh, conquest has ceased. I mean, there's been definitely those that tried. I mean, Saddam Hussein
yeah,
tried.
I mean, Russia
You know,
Russia annexed Crimea,
well, you know,
um,
well, and
and there's Hong Kong, but
yeah,
there's like nuance there. You
yeah.
know,
There's
it's not
nuance
like they
there.
just. It's not like when Hitler looked at Poland and was like, mine. Like, it's not how. That's not how that worked.
Yeah, yeah. That guy got yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I think that's all we're gonna do for today. My the connection seems to be getting a little unstable, so I'm gonna cut it for now.
Yeah.
Uh,
No problem.
yeah, Derek, thank you for
Okay.
spending your time. I think we spent about 20-25 minutes actually discussing and just catching up.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
I hope it was of use to you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and it's always a great conversation with you. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, stay warm over the next couple of days. It's supposed to
You
get
too.
really frigid.
You too. I just put out that little notice from the Texas Department of Transportation that driving is going to be a little bit difficult next couple of days. So you guys be
Yeah,
careful.
they're a little late on that notice.
Yeah.
All
All right, buddy. Thank you.
right, man. Thank you. Bye.